Hello and welcome to Penny for a Tale. My name is Mitchell. I am your host today, and we have some amazing guests during this awesome stream and wonderful night that we have for this Monday. But I'll let them introduce themselves because I feel like they can do it better justice than I ever could. So why don't we start with Tara?
Hello, my name is Tara Clapper, and among other things in the LARP world, I design LARPs and created what was once a digital LARP only called Chariot LARP. It is in a sci-fi setting, but we are doing some in-person events starting this month. So we are excited to talk about that. And yeah, I also have 3 LARPs I'm participating in this month. So I just got back from one and I'm leaving for another, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it.
All right, why don't you go ahead, Terry?
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Terry. I participated in a lot of Terry's online digital LARPs when they first came out for the Chariot universe. And of course, like the next progression from being one of the most active participants is finding a way to get involved and help future things come up. So I've been helping with just getting the word out there about some of the upcoming Chariot events and doing some planning, roping some people into some crazy roles, which we're really excited about. And yeah, much like Tara, my calendar is just like full of things. I never thought that I would be to the point of using a calendar, especially for different events, but I'm definitely there.
I mean, that sounds like a good problem to have.
Sometimes, but when you have a calendar, you have to say no to some things.
Yes, that's the hard part.
Yeah, I'm mainly just saving up for a calendar and winging it until then. But I understand. So I'm sure people on here are have lots of questions and stuff like that. But I think the basis that we'll start off from is first off, what is a digital LARP, and second off, what is Chariot?
So the digital LARP format, it is a live action role playing experience, but we do it online. In fact, we're starting to use Zoom. We used to use Google Hangouts, but we're starting to use Zoom. And so it's just like this. It's like having a conversation with a screen. And in some of the digital LARPs, the computer that you're talking on is kind of part of the game, and in other ones, it's not. So, since Chariot takes place in a sci fi universe, the computer is really part of the game. The game itself is all about a video conference, so it makes a lot of sense. I designed another one which was all about vampires. It was called First Bite, Second Birth. And the premise of that LARP was that you're a new vampire, you wake up, and all you see in the room with you is a laptop. And so we've been able to kind of incorporate technology that way. People tend to think that it's a lot like the tabletop role playing that we do on this stream and that people do online. And it does have a lot of similarities, but it's what the types of LARPs that we run. There usually aren't dice. Occasionally, we have like a resolution thing, which happens at a game where we narrate a couple things. But for the most part, it's person to person, freeform content where as a GM, I'm more of a player and I just like drop in information like here's a news bulletin or something like that. Terry, do you want to talk
Yeah,
about
Yeah, go
Chariot?
ahead.
yeah. So the Chariot universe is really unique because so we've run like different segments in the past. One of them was called the Riders of the Apocalypse. And with that, we kind of destroyed the earth, as crazy as that sounds. And so these chariot ships are now taking the role of getting humankind off of planet Earth into, you know, trying to find another planet out there that would be sustainable for our species. So it's really interesting to discuss some of the things that come up. Aboard these ships, much like Tara was just talking about, everybody wants to know, well, what do you do? And so a lot of it is video conferencing, you know, talking about the problems that we're facing. Like, how is reproduction going to work? You know, like, are we going to explore different planets? Are we going to use engines that are faster and compromise safety? or are we going to put everything into safety and making sure that we make it there in one piece? So it's a lot of moral dilemmas and exploring the thoughts and processes for what life would be like as humankind just left the planet.
Yeah, we also have a lot of political debates, I guess, within the universe. So we keep the real life stuff out of it because we all deal with that enough. But we do position the different characters on different sides of certain issues, or in some instances, the characters agree on a lot of things. So, for example, we had one group, and everybody who participated was really interested in playing a military type character. So we went in that direction. We had another group who was really focused on the opposite. So now there are all these different ships out there because they're all living in this universe of continuity. And one of them is out there to like race to the planet first and do whatever they can to get there, and they're ready to like blow up the other ships pretty much because they're very warlike. And while another ship is out there to like make peace with aliens along the way. So these different goals have been kind of simmering in the universe, and the original digital LARPs were all about meeting the people that you're going to go on the ship with before you leave this war-torn Earth. So that's what happened like in the last 2 years. But now that we're moving into the in-person LARPs, as well as doing this integration with both in-person and digital LARPs, we're looking at people from all these different ships talking to each other. We're looking at possibly exploring extraterrestrial life and the very nature of these ships themselves. So there's a lot of possibilities for it. Other LARPs, of course, have done all sorts of things where you go and explore planets, which is certainly on the table. But right now we're really focusing on exploring the nature of being on these ships, and especially being on an intergenerational ship.
That sounds awesome. So, is it a 24/7 LARP? Do people do stuff in between games, or is it primarily just at these events that things occur?
So the digital LARPs, originally we scheduled like 4 or 5 different sessions that were a few hours each. We found that most players actually enjoy about 3 sessions that are a few hours long each. And the sessions stack within one each other. So we'll have run one, and that whole group, run two might meet the next week, and then run one will meet again. And the different things they do affect each other. You can kind of think about it like how when Buffy and Angel originally were running at the same time and affecting each other's shows. That's kind of what we go for with Chariot, and it's really fun to get that rhythm. So right now it kind of runs that way. We do encourage some in between game actions. People would create art about like the things that they would miss most from Earth, things like that, and they would plot and kind of communicate on our Discord between events. And the in-person events that we're moving towards doing in addition to those do have the preparation you'd probably expect for a LARP that meets for that appropriate amount of time. So for the one that's going to be meeting for 4 hours, there's going to be some minimal prep for people to do. For the one we're planning in 2020 that meets over the entire weekend, it's going to be more like a destination LARP where you will want to create a lot of ties beforehand, and you'll have some things suggested to you in your backstory. So it certainly varies. And my hope is that one of my design hopes is that all of the things that we're used to doing for those types of LARPs, we can do in the digital LARPs, and we can integrate those two mediums more successfully. And we actually, for our upcoming Boston event, we have Shayna Cook game mastering too. And Shane is actually going to solely be responsible for ensuring that the online players and the in-person players have a completely integrated story. So no one group is more important than the other or anything like that. Their communication to each other is in fact vital, as they will learn throughout the course of the event. And yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And it's really up to each player and each group how much communication they want to do. I've had some groups do a lot of role play between the different sessions, and I've had others that just wanted to just show up for like 2 intense sessions and really kind of just put their all into it then, and either is fine.
And do you see this format only working for like modern or sci-fi or even futuristic settings, or have you ever toyed with the idea of doing a digital LARP with more of a fantasy setting?
I'm gonna give a short answer, and then I'll let Terry maybe throw some more ideas out there. I've done a couple in historical. Historical is actually my favorite LARP setting, and it's hard to design in because it can be really problematic. But I did one called Hellfire and Happiness, which was Regency era, and it was all about matchmaking and getting up to some shady business in Lord Byron's basement slash Hellfire Club. So that was really fun to try and do over this format because obviously we weren't on a computer in the game. And what I learned was we had different things like I would say, oh, okay, I'm gonna pass you a phone, not a phone, but something from that era, like a cup, and then I would do this, and then the other person would be like, oh, okay, thank you. And we were passing papers back and forth that way. And I also learned that you can dim the lights and just have a candle, and it makes the scene feel a lot more immersive. So we did that, and we did one in a dream world about different fairy type beings, and so we kind of took that took that approach. And I've also designed for the game theater, and they use it as like in a magic mirror format. So there are ways to incorporate it in fantasy.
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things to me was exploration digitally, without having necessarily like a map or anything in front of you. In one of the instances that Tara just described, there was Lord Byron's mansion. And we would just make up rooms and explore as we went. And suddenly he had a dungeon. And what happens in the dungeon? So it's very freeform and sandbox, and you kind of create the world as you go along. And I found that, you're not confined to specific things, that it kind of opens up the possibilities.
And so, what like new technologies are coming out there, or that you guys are most excited about that are coming out that you feel would change or at least better the whole experience of a digital LARP?
Virtual reality.
Yeah, I'm already developing in VR, so I'm already writing LARP experience specifically designed for that. And there are people like us out there already doing this kind of work, and there are people out there in VR creating settings with nothing to put in them. And I'm like, no, you just need the settings, and I'll put people in them, and that's totally good. Like if you give me a castle or a spaceship, or some grand estate, like trust me, I will make a cool LARP there. So yeah, that's kind of the next frontier. I just got recently a new computer, so I just got like the right equipment that I need to actually do everything. But VR is the next frontier for sure.
Which I'm super excited about. That just sounds amazing. So you got several events coming up. So why don't you just tell me like everything Geek Initiative has on their calendar? What's filling up your calendars?
So September 23rd and 25th is one run of Chariot, and that is called Failsafe. That's kind of like a precursor for the in-person and digital LARP that's happening on September 29th. And that event is happening at the Adventure Pub in Boston, Massachusetts. And there's also the digital component that is occurring at the same time. So we're going to have those overlapping. And then coming in 2020, we have a weekend LARP experience coming, and that's going to be in Virginia.
Yep, and that experience is going to be a little different than what we've done before. It's going to kind of have a prequel feel to it, and it is going to be kind of set in a space age setting. So it's going to feel more like the 60s, the early 60s, than our futuristic, kind of gritty end of this century norm that we have for Chariot, which is pretty fun. So as you can probably tell, I have like all these plot secrets in my head that I'm trying to like not drop, but there's a lot that we'll learn about the history of the Chariot program. And so if you're the kind of person who likes to do that investigative role play and that inventive role play, this is kind of the time to get involved.
That's awesome. So, can you give us a teaser for your next game?
Oof. I can tell you that there will be, we are going to start to really explore extraterrestrial life and the true nature of the Chariot mission. Because the premise, of course, is that we are, Earth is in bad shape, we're leaving. It takes 3 to 4 generations to get to the planet that we're going to. So it's a big sacrifice. The generation that never sees Earth or Proxima B is of course going to have a wildly different experience than their parents' generation, and that brings with it a lot of ethical dilemmas and kind of embedded goals that people have. And some of the younger people probably have some different goals, because they haven't really known a planet before, so they're going to face some different issues. And we'll also, in the 2020 event, we'll even get to see what the founders of the Chariot mission, who truly germinated this idea, intended for it. And then we've already had some play that showed how that changed and actually launched. And there are definitely some secrets in there. So if you like political play, that's a big component of it. Kind of historical stuff, a little bit of conspiracy theories, and definitely people, all these characters having their own agendas. That happens as we get into the in-person events. We are going to get a little bit more physical with the role play. So in our 2020 event, that is when you will have the chance to, really get more into things like committing a murder on board the ship, or possibly using a laser gun. Right now, we're kind of keeping it. We kind of have to like play that out in different fashions since a lot of it happens online. But we have had some on-screen deaths, arrests, all sorts of malfunctions. There is a virus out there that takes over workstations, so that's fun. That's actually murdered one of the captains. And most of these adventures do have my character in it. Her name is Captain Emily O'Sullivan, and she is an imperfect hero, really an anti-hero. And they have made different copies of her. So if you like cyberpunk elements, there's a little bit of that too. We have this ethical debate in the universe about what happens when a person becomes more than 50% machine. And so each crew debates that. And the cool thing is each chariot has come up with their own decisions on these moral and ethical and legal issues. And they're going to be running through the universe with their own sets of laws. And so what happens when they meet up with another crew? They might have truly evolved some really different ethics in societies, or they might encounter some situations that have caused them to do some extreme things.
So when kind of developing the whole setting and scenario for Chariot, what were some inspirations, and why wasn't it Event Horizon?
For me, I've never seen that one actually. The inspiration, I've never seen Battlestar Galactica either.
Oh, Terry, have you at least seen Event Horizon?
No. Some people have told me that it's BSGS, but it was actually a show called Ascension. And if you watch that show, you might get a few hints about where the plot is going, but not a lot. And then most recently, I watched a Netflix series called Another Life, and that has a really more of a psychological approach. There are a lot of physical things that happen in that show, but it definitely has a more psychological approach. It has a more kind of pressure cooker feel to it, of like, great, here's this crew, things happen to them, now they're stressed out, what are they going to do? So I've taken, some inspiration from both of those things. And of course, I've watched Star Trek all my life. So I think in terms, at least, of the types of characters that I've created for Chariot, I've taken a lot from Star Trek: The Next Generation. One thing I did in the game design that I've always intended to scale, right? Because I designed it as a digital art for less than 10 people, but always had the intention of running it as a weekend-long event. And one thing I did was I created different divisions, kind of like how you'd have different factions in, any kind of LARP you play. And these different divisions are sort of like where you would be if you were on like the Enterprise, right? You might be assigned, to the medical division, or you might be a tactical officer. But the ones on Chariot are a little bit. The technology isn't advanced as you see on Star Trek, so it's a little less smooth, and there are checks and balances built into those factions. And what I mean by that is the people who clean the sewage system and make sure that your food is cooked are also in the same division as people who make sure that the air works and that the computer systems stay online. So if you're like, I'm just going to be really shitty to this janitor, well, good luck when they cut off the oxygen in your quarters that night or something, because I've kind of really built it in so that there's a thorough exploration of the balance of power. It hasn't come out as much because we've been playing with groups of 5 to 10 people, and I'm really curious to see what happens as we ramp that up and eventually have 50 people, like staff members playing roles, really kind of pushing those buttons. So we're going to start to see more and more of that as we go. We're certainly going to see that at the event on the 29th, because we're going to have a greater total number of players online versus in person. So we're really going to start with that whole kind of alliance building thing and adversarial relationships on more than a personal level, and getting multiple layers of engagement for those characters.
Terry, you got any additional comments on that?
No, I think Tara really covered most of it there.
So what's always interested in me is kind of where a LARP leans to, either PvP of like the Masquerade Vampire or the PvE of a lot of Boffer LARPs I've been to. Where does Chariot fall on that line?
I want to let Terry answer that, because I created this LARP and then he started as a player, and I think his perspective is probably more accurate on this, really.
Yeah, I think it definitely depends on the individual people. So we have, there's one player who devised this whole computer program system that would just destroy ships that were trying to blast off from Earth. And I can see that definitely as a PvP type environment. I would say for the most part, people play this game for hope. The idea that there's life out there. So it's been a good melding and blend of PvP and environment, but with a main focus on the environment. Let's come together as humanity and overcome these obstacles.
And so, as storytellers, kind of leaders within the the Geek Initiative community and for Chariot and stuff like that, what sort of elements of gameplay are you trying to emphasize?
Definitely, one thing I've been leaning towards recently is this checks and balances that I just described. This design that lets players kind of pick out what kind of agency they want to play and use it, so they don't feel confined to just what's on a one-page character sheet. So that's been really important for me. It's always been important for me to design inclusively, and we've done that in a few ways. We definitely we're playing in a future time, and it's not a time without strife. In fact, it's a time when the Earth has kind of failed at our hope that it will work out and that it will survive. And so every mission kind of has its own feeling on that. And we actually had 2 different Chariot crews in our initial runs, and one was a bunch of women got together and said, we want an all-woman crew and see what decisions we make. And so we had a crew of all women and a crew that my friend Corey Diaz Seminara ran that was all people of color. And I'm talking about the players. And each group kind of took hope in a different direction that I think the greater groups didn't on their own. And so that was neat. So having that element as part of the design was really important, just to kind of be open to that kind of inclusivity, and also to build in, like, I would say I I really like brutal social interactions. And I'm not every player's cup of tea because I like to push that kind of drama in game, and I think the same kind of applies to Terry. But I'm pretty upfront about that's the kind of LARP I'm designing, right? That we're here to have emotional, social interactions. I designed for empowerment. Chariot is definitely an empowerment LARP if you choose to play it that way, where you can feel free to explore a certain aspect of yourself through your character and make some progression. Yeah, sure, it's a gritty world and environment, but that is possible to do. And one thing that we do a little differently is we have very personalized character creation processes. So we do use sheets. So people do fill out sheets, but sometimes I follow up with different questions because if someone comes at me and says, um, I want to explore, I'll just pick out a few that people have said. I want to explore, how I've been bullied. I want to explore abuse. I want to explore, the trauma that I've had to deal with, as a person of color. I've tried to weave those experiences into the greater narrative. And I try to get them set up with a bunch of other players that are comfortable playing on those themes. So it can get pretty deep when you think about leaving Earth, the things you left behind, or playing the generation that has never known Earth and just has a really big generational gap understanding with their parents, which I know is something that a lot of people feel, in real life. So those big issues, those broad issues, are what we go for. Also, a lot of the technological nature of the digital arts and the genre does allow for a lot of like sabotage and cybercrime and exciting stuff like that. And like I said, we even had a character get arrested. The player had like police siren light things on behind her, and so we're just in the middle of playing and her lights go out, and then we see red and blue lights, and it was just and she played like a sound effect, and it was just the coolest thing to see that because everyone knew what it meant. So we've had a lot of cool exploration in those realms, and I think the blend of all those things and the different layering that we have and a game that can really scale from 5 participants, probably up to 100, but we're gonna keep it under 60 for now. It has a lot of potential, and I hope people are excited about playing in it.
Anything more to add to that, Terry?
Yeah, I think moral dilemma is one of the big things that Chariot brings to the table. To give you an instance, in the Chariot universe, there are these, I almost want to call them deities. I was portraying Father Time, and we were discussing what we were going to do with the mortals around the earth. And I was talking to Mother Earth and, selling her on the idea that the humans are destroying your lakes and your forests. They're burning down your trees. Wouldn't it just be better if we started over fresh? And that devious tension led to essentially our group being divided into two. One was utterly annihilate the humans, and the other was, well, we don't want to, cause any more bloodshed than we need to. So things definitely heat up, and unlike in a boffer LARP where I think you would pick up your boffer and be like, okay, we've come to the point of violence. Now I'm going to knock you into bleed out or whatever the occasion may be. It's really a battle of words and of minds, and you have to think tactically and create, like a long running plan for whatever your eventual goal is.
That's true. When these characters are already on board the ship, which is where we're getting to in our kind of state of play, consequences are different. If you're here on a healthy Earth and you can actually get away with murder, then you can just get away with it and like leave or go to another country or something. If you are on a ship that only has a limited number of people and room to grow for the amount of people that will be produced on your journey, that's a lot harder to get away with, right? So all of those systems in place make for a lot more sneak and sabotage and cleverness to survive. And one other thing I want to add is we have in the different divisions I created, one of them is all about, I have things like education and then the armed forces there, but I also have one completely devoted to the arts and one devoted to the sciences. And all of these, the default is for all of these different groups, these different divisions, to get pretty much equal funding on the ship. So as a society, we go into it saying, okay, science is as important as being armed, as is important as educating each other and our children, as is important as creating art. So we go into it with that, but it's very interesting because when votes come up, and yes, there is they make a voting system and a player is in charge of it. When votes come up, it's interesting to see what people vote for. And in these very small groups, sometimes you'll get like 3 people will vote for make the arts the most important thing. And so that becomes a majority. I'm really curious about how that's going to scale, and I'm excited to see what it will look like.
Yeah.
Me too. Are there any, because, as someone who's a huge fan of horror, are there any horror elements within these digital LARPs? And if so, how do you go about cultivating that fear?
Sometimes in Chariot we go there. We went there more with the vampire game, but I would say there is going to be a little bit more of a fear sensation going into some of the in-person events.
Yeah, I would say I'm a big horror fan myself. I recently saw the new It movie that came out. And to me, the scariest thing that's always out there is just the crazy things that people can do, you know? So not knowing what the rest of the crew is going to do on a spaceship that you can't escape from. The thing that always dawns in the back of my mind is you're deep in space where nobody can hear you scream, you know? And trapped aboard these ships, there are definitely going to be some decisions made that make people scream.
Awesome stuff. So for your live events coming up, what sort of kind of props or looking kind of like setting material are you using to kind of cultivate that shippy feel?
Well, we're starting with the actual setting. So Terry mentioned that our event at the end of the month is in the Adventure Pub in Boston. And I had the excellent experience to get to go see this room right before the pub opened. And when I went into this room and saw the really cool sci-fi lighting and like the glass all around all the tables, I was like, this is Chariot. This is where we have our command meetings. I have to run a LARP here. So the setting makes up a lot of it. Like I said before, the cool thing about the setting is you can also have technology. So we're going to have computers and stuff in there. But if people want to play characters with various, artificial attachments, that's probably going to pop up. And then by 2020, we're not going to do any weapons or anything like that in the Adventure Pub because we don't want random people to walk in and think there's some kind of armed situation going on. But at our private event in 2020, I would say people will have the option to get a little bit more physical with their props and bring simulated laser weapons and stuff like that. So we are going a little more into that action direction, and props are something we use for that. I'd also say for the 2020 event, the venue that we're getting, it's amazing. It's not Frank Lloyd Wright, but very close. It definitely has that aesthetic, and it's outside and inside. It's just through and through. So we're really leaning into that early 60s feeling. And the event does take place on a ship, where you're in a simulated environment from the era that created it. So there's a lot going on there, and then there will be some technology in there too, computers and stuff, so that they can communicate. But it's a lot of it is setting, and then a lot of it some of the costuming people have done. We've had people play. One of our players portrayed a rudimentary robot, and she was more like the robot from the Jetsons because a child built the robot. And she actually had her daughter had wanted to play. We don't allow under 18 to attend these particular LARPs. So what we did for her was the mom played this robot, and then we gave a list of questions to the robot to ask the child. So between Larps, she would go to her kid in real life and say, well, everybody wants to know what color you want to paint the kitchen. And the kid actually designed pretty much like what our chariot looked like, which was kind of neat. And when we would have split votes on things, this character would be like, well, I can ask my creator. So we make major monumental government-wide decisions of the ship that were ultimately decided by like a 7-year-old.
And so I got two more questions for you. So the first one is, how do you handle character advancement? And the second one is probably something I should have asked all the way at the beginning. How do you handle character resolution in this system?
Well, it is
So
it is freeform, so most of it does involve some negotiation. And with the digital LARPs, we do a lot of that over text messenger. So if we were LARPing right here on the Zoom platform like we're using, I might also be in a Facebook message or a Discord message with you to negotiate our scenes and any kind of content warnings we have. But we have also had some narrative resolution rounds, which I'll let Terry explain because he actually wrote those rules.
yeah, so along with character advancement, one thing that I would say is it's much like real life and our day-to-day interactions, where as you're working in your position, you get to know other people, you know where to find things. You have an understanding of your environment and the limitations and capacities in which you can act. And I think in digital LARPs, that plays a huge thing. But also with the resolution rounds, these are what kind of empower people to know how their actions are creating effects in the world. So what will happen is everybody creates these different resolutions saying, like for example, in space with a Chariot mission, you might have, we want to forsake all safety and just blast off as fast as we can, and maybe your ship doesn't blow up. Maybe it doesn't, maybe one of your motors goes out, or it creates these different scenarios in which characters weren't expecting to find themselves, but based off of their actions, this is where they're at now.
Yeah, I'll also drop a hint because I did promise people that I'd give some hints. I, for the last few years, have been consuming a lot of content about dreaming and symbolism and how that integrates with technology. So another hint I'll give, as well as I guess an extra answer to both character progression and the question about what kind of material inspires me as a designer for this, I would say check out the OA, because it definitely contains a lot of inspiration for some of the things I'm about to drop. So if you want to talk about characters who can have the same dreams or communicate in different ways that are scientifically explainable but might seem almost spiritual, that is a direction that some of the plot may be going in as well.
I'm glad you mentioned the OA because
I love it. It's my favorite.
Such a good show.
Yes, it's so good. If you haven't seen the OA and you're watching this, please check it out. It's unfortunately being canceled.
Yeah. Are they at least coming out with a third season or just a second?
I don't think they are. They're saying it's canceled, but since the whole show is basically about conspiracy theories and is this real, the fans feel like they're being faked out, especially considering some of the cliffhangers they had at the end of season 2. So I gotta say, like the creators of that show are fantastic. One of them stars in it, and she's just really brilliant. Britt Marling, she's definitely a huge inspiration. It's really funny because people often ask, like, who is your LARP design inspiration? And I do have designers who have inspired me because I play their LARPs and interact with them every day. But I gotta say, like, Britt Marling is probably one of my top inspirations, because when I watch that show, if I watch a show and I'm so immersed that I feel like I'm actually at a LARP, but just somehow barred from participating because I'm not in the show, that to me is a really enjoyable piece of content. So if I can take elements from that and bring them to a medium where people can actually interact with it, I hope that'll make them really happy. So some of those elements are cool. I just got back from Imperial Magiscola, which was a very intense experience. It was like kind of like the darker side of the wizard universe. It is not all happy and rainbows and sunshine. And a lot of the themes that we discussed there, of course, were allegorical to our current time and situations, but there were a lot of things about repeating history, repetitive behavior, repeating symbols, both positively and negatively, and consciously and subconsciously. And it was really exciting and easy to explore that in a magical world. And I look forward to doing that type of exploration in a sci-fi world where we're using technology and kind of bridging that gap between technology and spirituality. It's This LARP has so many different directions it'll go in, and the digital LARPs are so neat because you run, usually run like 6 or 7 people through at a time, and if 6 people, send in character sheets and they all have something in common, then they're going to be playing a very different LARP than the next 6 people that go through. And I've had instances like that, not just with the themes, but or not just the type of characters they want to play, but the themes they want to play. And this is one I've seen come up more often as I think things get tense in the real world. And more than people wanting to play out a dystopian reality anymore, which, we had our Riders of the Apocalypse go through too. I think they're looking for how to make sense of the world and how to find hope in that. And that's our focus.
Sounds like an awesome message. So, other than Chariot, what are some LARPs in the area that you definitely kind of look for inspiration, or are just really excited about checking out?
I'll let Terry answer that because he's usually the one that finds them and manages this like huge LARP schedule for a larger group of friends.
Oh man, so we've got Scapegoat coming up in November. That's about like a wizarding type futuristic cyberpunk community in New York City. It's a different kind of event because you just go there and explore the city and things come to you. And so it's not like be in this building for 3 days. It's the entire city itself. So that's going to be really interesting. I'm excited about that. In January, Dragon Thrones in the game theater is putting on Dragon Thrones Heroes, and that's really like a fantasy type setting. If you're familiar with Game of Thrones, it's kind of like that. And then next October in 2020, there's an event by Flamma Mysteries. It's called Stormwrecked, and that's in North Carolina. It's on the beach. It's in a beautiful resort, and it's based on pirates and the Navy. And I think that's going to be super exciting as well.
Yep. And then Imperial Magiscola was so good. I bought a ticket to the 2021 right away when I came back because it was so deep. I love the original New World Magiscola. It will forever have a place in my heart. But getting to explore kind of the underbelly of society is really fascinating to me. And I've been doing a lot of exploration of the shadow self through role play and kind of just really examining all aspects of myself there and really, trying to create experiences for people where they can choose to do that if they want to as well. And so that one's had a big impact on me too. So, and then this weekend I'm going to Mystical Rome. So I'm like still dealing with all these feelings from Imperial. I'm doing all my promotion and some of my writing for Chariot this week. And I'm also getting ready to play this Roman merchant who kind of works for a crime family. So that's a lot to do on top of a full-time job within the span of a week. But I'm making it happen. And then after Scapegoat, I'm gonna like have some more relaxed time where I probably do a little more table topping and streaming and less running, or attending big LARP events. But I'm looking forward to all those events in 2020 so much.
Or awesome stuff. So did you guys have any closing remarks for people watching?
I just want to say that I put my heart and soul into Chariot. I started developing Chariot when I lost my job a few years ago, and my friends say, "Oh, I'm sorry you lost your job, but can I give you money to run a LARP, please? We've kind of been waiting for this." And I said, "Well, like, you need money to like run a LARP because you got to run a venue and all this stuff." And having just lost my job, that's terrible timing for that. So, but I was like, you know what? I could run one online, and that's how it started. And I started talking to a couple of other people who were kind of co-developing similar things. But I really put my heart into it, and it for a while it was like it was my only job was just running Chariots and then running a couple of the games after. But my goal has always been to do something that integrated the technology with that we're using for digital art with the traditional in-person LARP event. And so I've scaled back a little bit on doing the digital LARPs to make room for that expansion. So I'm so excited that it's happening. I will also say our ticket pricing is a little more accessible than you would usually pay for a LARP, and more accessible. Accessibility is huge in design for me. I myself have some chronic illnesses, so being behind the computer screen instead of traveling every week normally is a lot easier on me and my body. So our digital sessions right now are $55 for each game, and like I said, it's just more accessible because you're sitting in front of a computer. The Adventure Pub game is $75 and it includes a meal. So you're getting the experience and the adventure, the integration with that digital crew, and the meal. So we try to keep things pretty affordable. And we got a great venue, which we're pricing out tickets for now for 2020. But that is really important to us. And, it keeps it going. We also have people who have sponsored some tickets, and we're happy to have more people do that because there are some people out there that are like, I can't make it, or it's not at the right time, but I want to support you. You can support us by buying a ticket that we can give to somebody who can't afford to buy a ticket. That would be a big help too. So please join us. Sci-fi, it's fun. It's a continuing adventure. I've streamlined all the lore to fit on one page, so even though we have this huge long story going, you can just walk in and know what you need to know. And I just want to make it accessible, and I want to see you there.
All right.
Yeah, geekinitiative.com/chariot.
It is right there on the comments for those watching, and if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be right there in the details, and if you're listening to it via podcast, they just said it. But it will also be in the descriptions, just for your sake. Terry, do you have any closing remarks?
So I think that digital LARPs are a great way to break into LARPing as a hobby. Everybody's always like, how do I get involved? How do I get involved? It doesn't require, like Tara said, it doesn't require a huge ticket price. Garbing is really easy. You can just go to like a thrift store, find something that looks science fictiony, or even repurpose something that you already have.
And you only have to worry about your shirt.
Exactly. You can wear your pajamas down below and nobody will ever know the difference, I think that's really cool. But you'll also meet new people that will go to in-person events. So, it's a great chance to attend on digitally online or in person at the Adventure Pub and only commit to a few hours, and then try something out longer next year if you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. To add on to that, it's been really cool to watch some people that I know from different LARPs or who have never LARPed before meet on my digital LARP platform, and then come to like a high ticket price event a year later and meet in person, and they're like, oh wait, we've already LARPed together on Chariot. That's a super cool thing, and it's a really easy way to kind of get in the community without a high ticket price investment and find a group of people to go with. Terry and I actually became friends after we met at Dragon Thrones 1 and have since gone on so many LARP adventures together. We have a group that's regularly like between like 5 and 12 people. And so sometimes we'll just all go to a LARP. And we don't mean for that group to be exclusive. If you join the Geek Initiative community and you want to be in that group, like, please just tell us, because we love going to a LARP and saying, hey, we've got, 12 people. What can you do for us? Or, like, if you're looking at, we've even gone to a couple and said, if you're looking at dates to run your next event, could you do this one? We'll bring X amount of people. So it's really cool to kind of have that block of LARPers to kind of hang out with and come with you, and it certainly makes it a lot easier running them too. So please, 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 we want to make you feel included. We want to include you. We're inviting you. Don't be shy. It's definitely a great way to get started or to stay connected with friends all over the world.
All right, that is awesome stuff. Thank you guys once again for hopping on to the show. For those who are watching, we are back on in about 30 minutes to try out a new local tabletop role-playing game by a local creator, Quentin, and the game is called Zeitgeist. But he will explain more on that, so check us back out at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just in a little bit. Once again, thank you, Terry and Tara. I actually kind of like that combo. T squared here for a wonderful evening, and everyone enjoy themselves, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.